from the Africa Unbound Institute. We have a fantastic conversation that we're going to have that's all about lessons on pan-Africanism and how do we engage in the process of Sankofa, which is to go back and get it for Africa's future development. So today's call will be recorded so that anyone who's missed anything that we've discussed, they can watch, and it will be uploaded on the Africa Center YouTube page and also the Africa Unbound's YouTube page. Okay, so I will get started. I should say as well, this is an in conversation. So save your questions, add your questions in the chat throughout. And we've got a portion of the session today that's going to allow members and anybody to ask questions. So without further ado, I would love to first begin by introducing the Africa Center and the Young Africa Center before I introduce our speaker. So if you are new here and you've not heard of the Africa Center we're based in Southwark, and we're very much focused on putting on impactful events, virtual and in person, to really celebrate the culture that we know here in the diaspora. And the Young Africa Center really exists as an opportunity to connect young audiences, so audiences aged 18 to 35, to the Africa Center's mission. Today, we're joined by Dr. Rahel. Dr. Rahel Kassahun is an economist and human capability development specialist with over 25 years of professional experience. She is the founder of the Africa Unbound Center located in Addis Ababa, which is an organization that's working to promote a culture of excellence in Africa through training programs, seminars, and a unique Pan-African museum in Ethiopia. Dr. Rahel started her professional life teaching at the University of California, Riverside. And over the last 23 years, she has worked in global institutions such as the World Bank, the United Nations. And we are excited because in tonight's talk, she's going to be talking us through what her experience, both professionally, with her background and also with the Africa Unbound, what that has taught us about lessons on Pan-Africanism. So I'll just allow you, Dr. Rahel, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you for that introduction. And I want to start by saying I am deeply honored to be the first speaker of this legacy talk that you and Toby have put together at the Africa Center in London. I visited about a week ago. I was there, and it's a beautiful, beautiful space that you've created there. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm very much looking forward to talking with you and talking to the audience, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get some comments and questions and interact with the audience. So I'm excited. Let's do this.
Amazing. So the theme for the talk today is lessons on Pan-Africanism. How do we engage in that process of Sankofa for Africa's future development? And I think it's rather fitting for us to begin with, in your own words, Dr. Rahel, what has been your journey and approach to Sankofa for Africa's development?
Good question. My own journey, I am a development economist by training. And as you mentioned in your introduction, I started teaching at the University of California in Riverside. I was teaching economics there. And then in 2002, I joined the World Bank in Washington, D.C. and became a practicing economist in the Africa region. There I was able to get a chance to see on the ground how development is practiced. I had a lot of opportunity to interact with government agencies and ministries and people from the private sector and the civil society groups. And it was from the institutional perspective, development. I studied it, of course, how to, development theory and all of that in school, and then even taught it to a certain level. And then having practiced development on the ground, I was able to see some of the gaps. In other words, I'll give you an example. Africa has, our history here on the continent goes back not hundreds, not thousands, but years ago, millions of years. Here in Ethiopia, in the Afar region, the first, our earliest species, human ancestors, were found 4.4 million years ago. And so we as a human species have been growing and developing and evolving over many years. But when we practice, the way we practice development is, it just goes back. It doesn't take into consideration that we have a long history. So the Sankofa part, looking back to see where does our story start? Where do we begin? Of course, that's always going to be an arbitrary point, because we can only go back a certain number of years when we're digging into our history and our heritage, and we want to know about our ancestors and how they lived and how they survived and what they knew. But we do have quite a bit of knowledge and information about that. So much research has been done and continues to be done, and we're learning more and more every day in terms of what did our ancestors know? What did they practice? How did they govern themselves? How did they come together as society? How did they resolve conflict? When did they start producing, cultivating the land? That was thousands of years ago, over 15,000 years ago. Our ancestors have been cultivating the land and have been producing and have led productive lives in many different ways. So when we're thinking about our development, where we are today and where we want to go, when we think about what our future, how do we begin to think about our future? What do we want? How do we shape? How do we become active participants in our own development and in shaping our own future? We always will have to go back as far as we need to understand, what did we know? What did our ancestors know? What did they practice? And what is it that we can learn from that, build on it? Of course, we have to contextualize current day reality, and then identify our highest ideals when we're thinking about our development, where we want to be 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. What are the values that we want to work for? And what is the future that we want to build? So we cannot engage in this exercise unless we go back and understand how our ancestors lived and all the things that they have achieved. And it's very, very impressive. The more we look, the more we dig into it. We still, to this day, we don't know how they built the pyramids. We don't know. Yeah. We don't have that technology. Emotep and many others have been practicing medicine, performing surgeries thousands of years ago, 5,000 years ago. All of that, we need to understand. Our history cannot start with slavery. Our history did not start with colonialism. It goes much, much further back. So in order to have a clearer understanding of who we are and what we want, how we want to develop, it's extremely important that we engage in this kind of exercise.
That's a very good point. And I think, even bringing in some of the work that you're doing with the Africa Unbound initiative, you worked for over 20 years in these global institutions. What actually made you decide to leave and create the Africa Unbound initiative? And, when you think a lot about, that process of, our higher ideals, what did they look like? What was it that was missing in those institutions that made you decide that we needed an institution like the Africa Unbound in order for us to, I guess, offer an alternative in terms of the conversation around Africa's development?
Oh, wow. So much is missing from my perspective in these institutions. Well, okay, let me start by saying I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot by being at the World Bank and the UN. I was there. I worked for the UN agencies for a much shorter time, but I was at the World Bank for almost 10 years. And I have gained a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and I think that was, I feel very fortunate to have been in that space to learn everything that I've learned. But the idea that, first of all, it's, the idea that we Africans have to be active participants in our own development. That is not recognized in many of the global or national or even international institutions. I felt like that was a very important message. That was something that needs to be understood and then practiced. And I wasn't able to develop a program in a huge institution. When you work for many of these institutions, you do what you're told to do. Basically, there is a set program, there are certain projects, and then you're assigned to do certain work, and that's that you're there to perform that work, those tasks that are assigned to you. But after a while, it became very clear to me that unless Africans see themselves as the agents of development, we are not going to be able to make a difference, or we're not going to. Change is going to come, if it does, very, 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 very gradually. And so I felt this part was missing, and I felt it was extremely important that we engage in this kind of conversation. And the only way I soon became very clear to me that I will have to establish that organization that will create this platform. And that's what I did.
That's beautiful. And I mean, tell us a little bit more about the Africa Unbound's work so far. So, Africa Unbound was set up in 2019. So, throughout the time that you have been running this institution, this initiative, what have been some of the things that you have learned and like some of the impacts that, the Africa Unbound initiative has been able to impact across the continent?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, Africa Unbound was established in 2011. It was launched in 2011. We had an online platform where we were publishing online magazines and hosting different kinds of conversations, both in physical space as well as online. So, and then in 2013, we launched the first syndicated radio program on the continent. At the time, about 10 years ago or so, access to internet was not as widely, particularly young people were not able to access our programs online because the cost was prohibitive. It was very expensive. And people could not be online for an hour or two or three at a time to read publications or engage in these types of conversations that we're having today. So there were a number of requests to make it to make our programming more accessible. So that's when we we launched the initiative, the Africa Unbound on radio program. And we were broadcasting in about 8 countries. And that went on for about a year and a half. And then I had to move to Ethiopia. I was doing that from the US, and then I moved to Ethiopia to lead an organization, a regional organization. And then at that point, because it was a full-time job, I wasn't able to continue to produce the content for the radio program. So that we ended that. And then it was in 2019 that we actually opened the museum. So we did the online platform, the magazines, print version, online, then radio. And then I had to think about, the times were changing, and the way people consume information was also changing. So I was thinking about, okay, what should be the next incarnation of Africa Unbound? And in 2018, I went to the Smithsonian's African American Museum in Washington, D.C. And I was really blown away by how the information presented there was just, at first it was just done in a beautiful way. And it showed me what a powerful tool a museum can be in terms of educating the public, the masses. It gives you a physical space. So, there's that in-person interaction, but then you can also bring information wide. It's distill a whole lot of information and present it in a beautiful and engaging way that will get people to think about. And it's also you're curating an experience. So when people come into our museum, we want them to have we want to take them away from their day-to-day, everyday experience, and give them something else, something that engages the mind, emotions, the soul, at all levels. It engages your sight, your senses, your hearing, beautiful music, you're seeing all kinds of beautiful things. And then the guided tour, we have trained amazing, fantastic young people who provide the guided tour, and that also enhances the experience. When you come in, you're not on your own. It's a very interactive process. So I felt this would be a really good way to get people to think about certain ideas that they may not think about, or they may not, or the information. Many people say, wow, I didn't know anything about this and that. And so it's a great way to educate people. And so that's what we're doing.
And it's amazing. Like, if anyone ever is in Ethiopia, visit the Africa Unbound Museum. I visited myself, and it's so important for us to shape narratives and to change the narratives that is being told about Africa, and to really show what our ancestors did. That's amazing, because you're right when you say that sometimes people only think about like the continent from the history of colonization or slavery, but there is so much greatness within us. There's so much that we've contributed in how infrastructure is done. So I think the Africa Unbound is powerful in terms of offering an alternative narrative. So kind of on that, I wanted to sort of pull a bit more themes out there, which is, one of the slogans of the Africa Unbound initiative is unleashing the potential through individual minds. And you mentioned a bit there about the kind of soul spiritual connection as well being equally important. So how does one do that? Where do we begin? What is your work, through the Africa Unbound? What has your work been able to show you about how we can collectively do this better?
unleashing the potential through individual minds. That is an inward journey, first and foremost. We have to go within. The fundamental questions that we ask when you come here in the museum, and we have certain questions that we ask and we're constantly grappling with and discussing. And these questions are, who are we and who do we want to become? This is part of what the series of questions that we ask here. So who are we and who do we want to become? As I said, we can only begin to answer that question once we allow ourselves to look within and understand what our values are. What do we value? What do we care about? What's important to us? Where do we want to be? So this is first and foremost, it's an inward journey in terms of identifying what is important at this point in our history, at this point in our development, and then also becoming clear about our ideals, our principles, and our values. What do we want to live for? What do we want to die for? What do we care about? What defines us? So we start with these questions. It's an inward journey. And then also every now and then we come together to talk about these issues. We have informal discussions that we hold here at the center from time to time. We have a self-leadership skills development program, a very structured training program that we've offered from seasoned managers and directors of financial institutions to high school students. We also have seminars. We have individuals who come to share their experiences, their knowledge, who are individuals at various levels, at various points in their professions. Some are retired, some are mid-level professionals, some are just entering the workforce, young professionals, and then artists and students and all kinds of people. So it's important. I mean, both. It's a two-part. One, we need to ask ourselves. It's an introspective. It's an inward journey. We need to have deep reflections within ourselves. And then every now and then we need to come together as a group and have these discussions that will allow us to learn from each other's experiences, share information, share knowledge, and just share our stories, our struggles and our pains and our hopes for the future. All of that is extremely important. So we need to, and it's about building a community. We need communities. It's the people who are interested in these issues often feel very isolated and alone. So I felt it was extremely important for us when we were building the space. It was very much I wanted to create a space where people feel like this is a place where we can come with our questions and with our frustrations and with our hopes and dreams for the future. Something that is positively charged and that will inspire us and encourage us to find answers to some of these very complex questions.
That's powerful. And just to say to everyone that we are going to be opening up the floor. So I've got a few more questions, but we'll be opening up the floor soon. So please, if you've got questions, add them in the chat so that you can also ask Dr. Rahel to hear a bit more of her insights too. So something that I think would be really interesting to also kind of touch on is, you've worked in this space, firstly from, kind of starting out at kind of like universities, teaching about this, to working in global institutions, to then creating the Africa Unbound initiative. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you see the African continent facing today? And how do we begin to kind of overcome them? I know it's quite a heavy question, and there's so many ways that you could sort of respond to that. But I think it would be interesting to get your insights and your perspective. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see the continent facing today, and how do we begin to actually solve some of these?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're facing all kinds of problems and challenges today. It's not just here in Africa, it's everywhere. I mean, the entire world is going through some major, major challenges, and what feels like intractable problems, challenges that who knows how long it will take to solve. But I think we particularly, I want to, the theme of our conversation here is lessons on Pan-Africanism, and I want us to start. Let's talk a little bit about what Pan-Africanism is. To me, Pan-Africanism is about love for Africa. Okay, it is about people's, how we feel, that sense of connectedness that we feel to the motherland. And for some people, particularly in the diaspora, some people may have been born in other countries, in Europe, US, Australia, and different parts of the world. But still, there is that sense of connection that people feel and sense, that they may not be able to articulate it. Even those of us who were born, raised here on the continent, may not be able to clearly articulate that sense of connection that we feel. But it's that sense of belongingness, it's that sense of responsibility. And whoever feels like, I need to do something, I want to do something for Africa or in Africa, to me is a Pan-Africanist. So what Africa needs now, what Africa needs today, yes, we have many, many, many challenges on all fronts: political, social, economic, and on various levels. Unemployment is extremely high. And we also have problems like high inflation, debt, all kinds of issues, okay? So if we start thinking about the challenges and the problems, it can be overwhelming. What I would suggest and what I teach is for people to start thinking about what are you interested in doing? What do you care about? What bothers you? What do you want to change? What do you feel, if there was money, time, distance was not an issue, what would you do? Okay. And then start thinking about, first, without any limitations, start thinking about what would you do if you can do anything you want, anything you can, what would you do? And then that will kind of give you a sense for what you may be talented in, your talents, your gifts, or just, an area that you are interested in exploring, investigating, researching, putting some time and effort and money into. And then as you explore, grow into it, and spend time with certain questions, then it becomes clearer to us. I mean, Africa Unbound wasn't born overnight. It's a question that I have been, it came out of a series of questions that I lived with. I thought about for years and years and years, and research went into it. I've been researching and reading and writing, and it wasn't very clear to me that I was going to create something like this, a center called Africa Unbound. I didn't know that, but I knew something was wrong about the way we think about and practice development. I knew we were not doing as much as we could. And then so, you know, it's just something, it may be just an inkling. It may just be just an idea here, an idea there, inspiration, something that grabs your attention here. And so, you know, as you engage in that kind of, you know, understanding that, okay, so if I do this, if I continue to just kind of go down the rabbit hole, if there's something that kind of grabs my attention and I pursue it, I look into it, it may lead to something bigger, something I may not be able to understand, to see clearly at the moment, but you know, let me just see what happens. And so if each of us engage in that kind of process, then we will do something of value, not just for ourselves and our families, but for the world, for Africa. So I think, you know, we should be very much aware of what's going on in the world, but we don't want to be overwhelmed by it because the challenges are too big, too deep, too complex. So be aware of what's going on, but also spend more time understanding who you are and what you want and how what kind of role you want to play in this world.
That's powerful. And I think it kind of touches on Ubuntu. I am because, you know, we are, and thinking about, you know, that focus on really understanding what can I do? What can I see that, yes, it may be a challenge, but I've got the skills in doing. And I think, you know, even with the rise of Afrobeats and, you know, music, there are so many ways that we are shaping the narrative. There's so many ways that we're changing the stories that are being told, you know, about the continent. I think it's always good for us to remember that if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. And I think, you know, something I wanted to touch upon before we open it up is, you know, Africa Unbound. Why the name Africa Unbound? What is the unboundness that you had in mind when, you know, you were thinking of that? Because this has been many years in the making, and the impact that Africa Unbound is having and will continue to have is, you know, is exponential. So where was the impetus for that name, and what does that mean to you?
Great question. No limitations whatsoever. It's first and foremost, I wanted to live and work for a big idea. I wasn't interested in playing small. I wanted something big, something that feels almost impossible. So that's something that's exciting. You know, that's it's challenging, it's exciting, it can be a little scary, but you give it your best. You give it your best. You do what you can. I may not be able to see an Africa that is unbound in my lifetime, but the process, I want to be a contributor to that process, basically, because that the vision is Africa that is unbound, that has no limitations in terms of the wealth that can be produced, in terms of the fulfillment and generosity that can come out of Africa, and the soulfulness, the authenticity, all of it is limitless. So it's important for us to understand that and work, see how we can realize these ideas. So for me, it was important to work for a big idea that can inspire me and others into action.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to open up the floor, and I would love to encourage people to come off mute and ask any questions to Dr. Rahel. And at different points, I will also pick up on any questions that come up in the chat. So it would be good if you are asking your question, just to say your name, where you're from, and if you're from any specific organization, just to say that. But yeah, happy to open the floor and take any questions from people now. So you can use the reactions raise hand icon to do that.
Kathy, we have one question in the chat from Louis. I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. Can you please unmute and ask your question directly?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Louis. Yeah, go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Rahel, it's very nice to meet you. Not in person, but really nice to meet you. You are a great inspiration. I've heard and I've seen your LinkedIn account, and I've been following you ever since like in January 2021. And I'd like to express my gratitude and my appreciation to you. Then my question is, I'm a bachelor student in international relations. I'm here in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and I'm eager to understand how the principles of pan-Africanism can be effectively incorporated into global diplomatic efforts. And in your opinion, what are some practical steps that students like myself can take to actively contribute in like pan-Africanism from an international relations perspective? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should I take that question?
Yes.
Or do you want to take more?
Let's take that question first, and then we'll see if more questions come up in the chat.
Okay. Thank you very much. I didn't get your name. I appreciate the question, and I appreciate what you have said, your kind words. Pan-Africanism, of course, Pan-Africanism has been a concept, an idea, a movement that has been developing for almost now, 150 years, not quite, but for definitely over 100 years. And there have been many greatly influential Pan-Africanists who have contributed so much to the movement. W.E.B. Du Bois, of course, and also in diplomacy. I'm talking about people who have been very active in international relations and in the diplomatic world. So that includes people like W.E.B. Du Bois, Kwame Nkrumah, of course. Let me see who else I can. Of course, Nelson Mandela. These are some individuals who had very specific principles, and these people lived and worked for these principles. A lot of what we know about our heritage, about our culture, about where we are and where we need to go, Dr. Du Bois has written extensively about that. And so you may want to look into what he's written, his many books, as well as Kwame Nkrumah and others. For you, the question you asked, as it pertains to what you're doing in your school, in your studies, and where you may go as a professional. As I said earlier, I think we really need to think about what is Pan-Africanism. We cannot practice or think about Pan-Africanism in the way that they did 120 years ago or 50 years ago. The world has changed very much, and Africa is changing very much. And it's important to think about these questions and look into, do the research, write, speak, discuss. What should Pan-Africanism look like for the 21st century? What should change? What should remain the same? There are no blueprints. These are questions that we need to ask and then continue to look for the answers. But as I said, for me, I think it really is, it boils down to the individual, whoever identifies herself or himself as a Pan-African would be one who deeply cares about Africa and is interested in making a positive change, a positive difference, and will go to lengths to go through the challenges, the ups and downs, to make a real difference. And that can be done in so many different ways. You can be in academia, you can be in diplomacy, you can be in medicine, you can be in business. Pan-Africanism can look different, Pan-Africanists can come in all kinds of shapes and forms. And so it is very important to keep this idea, the concept, the movement alive, mainly because it's a way of affirming our commitment to the continent. It's a way of engaging with each other, and because it has a history. Pan-Africanism has a very rich history. So many people have given their lives to. They paid the ultimate price because they loved Africa. Because they cared so much about the progress that should be made, where Africa should be. And so it's important to understand what has been done, but then also think about what should Pan-Africanism look like in the next 20, 25 years. What do we want? What do we want to achieve as Pan-Africanists? And I think for me, as I said, it's really important as individuals to engage in that kind of introspective process, to understand how we can develop our skills, our talents, so that we can bring it out, develop it, and do something with it, and change the world, change the continent in our own small ways. And that will have cumulative effect. If 1,000 people, 10,000, 200,000, 1 million people will do something positive, then that will have a cumulative effect, and who knows where that will lead us. So it starts with the individual, and of course it's very important to build communities, like-minded people, so we can engage in these kinds of discussions, and then act, do something, organize, be actively engaged, make something happen, build something, and continuously try to improve on it, because we're never going to get it right the first time. So you have to go back and continuously improve on what you've started. And then that will be your contribution as a Pan-Africanist.
That's beautiful. Just something I wanted to ask you before, Spe, you can ask your question is, you worked for over 20 years in these global institutions. And for maybe some people who are maybe not so, who probably believe like global institutions such as the UN, the African Union, UNDP, like these are the institutions where if we want to impact change, we should go through those institutions. Of course, I know there's a lot of reading and there's a lot of work that you've done around that you've actually experienced this, but was there ever one experience that you had throughout your career that just made you say, I am done with this and I'm going to leave and I'm going to set up my own thing? Because I know you did talk about it more generally, like how slow change takes. to happen. But was there one experience or one story or something that you can like give us that would give us a bit more of an insight into what are these global institutions really like, you know? And yeah.
I don't think there was one particular experience. I think it's excuse me. I'm sorry, let me just grab some water very quickly. Yeah, so there was no one particular experience or event that I can think of. I think it's just a series of events. And what you, as I said, you know, these institutions are in place for a particular purpose. And they're very good. They can be, it's a really good place to learn. All of these institutions have been great places to learn about how do these institutions work? What are some of the major challenges, both at institutional levels, not just these global institutions, but I'm also talking about governmental institutions. I'm talking about the private sector. What are some of the major challenges? What is being done in different parts of the world that's working? So these institutions are a good place to learn about the challenges, what's working. They're also a good place to learn about organizational, organizational development, systems, processes, developing oneself as a professional. All of these things you learn from being in an institution, but there can be very limiting in that if you're a person who has a vision, or if you're a person who has a certain idea that you want to test, to realize, those are not the places to be. So I would say go there to learn, but then when I say go there, I'm talking about the institutions that you mentioned, but also it can be in the corporate world. It can be any business, anything established already. I very much encourage young people to get experience at some organization, some place before you go out on your own, because it's important. You learn from established institutions. You learn so much from, and then you understand what you like about it, what you don't like about it. I really don't believe, unless you're absolutely clear about what you're doing, what you want, and if you're an artist or something else, okay. But I don't very much encourage young people to start their own venture directly from school, when they get out of school, or I think it's extremely important to get practical experience. So I can't point to one question, to one particular event or issue. It's just that if you have ideas that you want to implement, that it may not be the place. So they could be very restricting and limiting in that way. Yes.
Thank you. Zubair, and then we would take Mape. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. Zubair, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Rahel. I'm Zubair, and I'm a recent graduate in international development here in London. And first, I just want to say how inspiring these words have been, and your professional background is really, really inspiring. But I know you mentioned how our history did not start with colonialism, but me as a Mauritian, I think the only African identity I know is directly a byproduct of colonization. I wouldn't exist if it was not for colonization. I know how bad it sounds, but my ancestors wouldn't have been brought to Mauritius if it was not for colonization. So I was just kind of taking on this line of argument, asking you how, like, we know, like, organizations like the ICC and the World Bank have really been kind of disproportionately affecting Africa. Do you see perhaps a change in the geopolitical arena? And how you mentioned in your previous answer how it's not a place where we can grow, but do you see that perhaps changing? And if so, what would you say to me as a 22-year-old trying to get into that kind of whole realm of international organizations and hoping to make a change? Do you have any kind of advice or any comments on that? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Well, like I said, these institutions can be very, very, you learn so much because some of the best people in the field, for example, for me, when I joined the World Bank, it was very exciting to work alongside individuals I used to study when I was in graduate school. So some of the best and brightest minds can be in these institutions. So there's a lot of value in that way. And how can you get in? They're very, very competitive. I was able to get in because I did an internship at the World Bank when I was in graduate school. And in that way, I made some connections. I met some people, and very luckily, when I finished my degree, when I got my PhD, I was just passing by the World Bank. I didn't even apply for a job, and I run into a manager of a unit that I used to intern in. And we started a conversation. Where are you? What are you doing now? And it was I had just completed my PhD. And he basically just offered me a job. So I know internships can lead to full-time engagement. So I would encourage you to apply for internships. It may or may not be paid. Sometimes you just have to pay the price. You have to do things that you may not want to do. So, but because these institutions are so competitive, I would encourage you to look into internships and establishing relationships so people will know who they are, what you have to offer, because they're very, very competitive. They get for every position, for every vacancy, there could be thousands, hundreds and thousands of applicants from all around the world. So while you're doing that, though, I highly encourage you to also look into other places. What else can you do? I'm not sure. Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but you want to have, multiple plan A, plan B, plan C in case this doesn't work. What else would I like to do? And stay open. Stay open, because you may feel like, a certain institution is the place for you. And if you had a chance to be there and work there, you would learn so much, or you would grow so much, or that's really where your heart is. But you never know. Sometimes we feel so strongly about something and then we end up somewhere else. And then, it turns out to be a great thing. It turns out to be a great opportunity, or the best place for you. So go for what you want, do what you need to do, explore all the options. And I highly, like I said, it's very, very important to just cultivate personal relationships, because it's important to stand out, because on paper, just about everybody looks the same. But if you have that personal relationship with somebody who can vouch for you, that can help. But also, like I said, internships can work, can help. But more importantly, stay open, explore.
Thank you, Dr. Rahel. We have a comment/question from Mape Mumbi. Mape, do you want to come up mute and ask your question?
Good evening, everyone. I think it's more of a comment. It'd be great to get any reactions, but it's really more of a comment and less of a question. Thank you.
Okay, so the comment was that Pan-Africanism has been on the wane. It needs rebooting as a matter of urgency, priority, strategy for inter and intra-Africa cultural exchange and knowledge production. I guess given the increased bilateral and multilateral resource pouring into what I could describe as an anti-Africa ideology of philosophy, just a thought I should mention that as someone in Africa and hopefully through networks such as these, will work out a seamless way to achieve results through current and future generations. So I guess maybe you can respond to that in terms of, Pan-Africanism needing, I guess, rebooting as a matter of urgency and priority. Maybe any thoughts around inter or intra-Africa cultural exchange and knowledge production. So I know it's more of a comment, but yeah, just anything that you want to pick out from that comment. And of course, if I didn't ask it properly, feel free to correct me as well. So yeah, maybe you can respond to that, Dr. Rahel.
Sure, I absolutely agree. Yes, Pan-Africanism has, it's had its cycles over the years, and at the moment, we don't have a large number of champions. I believe it's still a very useful framework for us to the ideology, the movement is definitely something that we need to keep alive. As I said earlier, we need to rethink what Pan-Africanism should be and what it means to us. That's something that needs to be discussed. But, as I said, we here at Africa Unbound, we're looking at it. Our approach to Pan-Africanism is looking at, or anyone who cares about what's going on in Africa and is interested in making some kind of a positive contribution, whether it's individually or collectively, is a Pan-Africanist, and in that way, we need to keep it alive. So right now, Pan-Africanism was very political for most of the last century and a half. It was about the politics. It was about Africa gaining independence from the colonial powers. And then also, there was the economic aspect of it. Marcus Garvey and others have talked about it, the importance of self-reliance, economically being independent. That's still very much valid today. Our countries are highly dependent on aid, and we cannot develop on aid. We have to figure out other ways. Of course, trade has been is one way, but also individual ingenuity has to be developed, has to be put to practice. So if we see it as individual responsibility, we each have a responsibility we come to this world with a certain gift. Here in our museum, there's a section that discusses the belief of the Dagara people in Burkina Faso. The Dagara people believe every child that comes into this world comes with a certain gift for the community, and they organize themselves to create the enabling condition for the child to deliver her or his gift. That's part of the Sankofa process, going back to get that wisdom, to understand that each of us come to this world with a particular gift, with a particular skill or a talent that needs to be identified first, and then developed, and then put to practice. We have to do something with it. Whatever way we choose to engage, whether it's on the political front or in business or academia or arts, whatever calls you, whatever speaks to your heart. And that's why it's important to engage in that introspective process. It's important to understand, what do I want? What do I want to put my attention, my focus, invest my time, my energy, and my resources to develop? That will allow me, if developed well, it will allow me to capitalize on and help you as an individual and the collective live a fulfilling life. So that's how we make our contributions. It looks like Kathy is urging me to wrap up.
Yeah. I was gonna say, depending on, I know that we've run over a little bit, but the chat is popping, and there's like some very fantastic questions. So I don't know, Dr. Rahel, like, do you think we could take just the last three questions?
Sure.
Or...
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So and of course, if anyone needs to drop off, that's fine. I thought an interesting question came in from Junior, which was that I have a question about if and how unbound. Actually, Junior, you can ask your question. It's much better coming from yourself directly.
Hi, okay, sure. Hi, Rahel. Thank you for the talk today. It's been very inspiring and insightful. My question is about how Pan-Africanism, Pan-African groups such as Unbound in Ethiopia and elsewhere, how they maybe consider the concept of intersectionality as part of their goals and purpose. I've been seeing in Ethiopia about an escalation in homophobic attacks, for example, against the LGBTQIA community. And as someone from that group myself, not just in Ethiopia but worldwide, seeing these things, I think it's important that it be part of the conversation when we talk about Black liberation or African liberation. Because as you were saying, every child who's born in the world has a gift and is meant to be here. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that might be. Thank you.
Thanks, Junior.
Thank you. What's the name?
Junior.
Junior. Okay. Let's take all the questions and then
yeah. Olu, would you want to ask your question? Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for your contributions, Dr. Rahel. Just a very simple one, which means it's quite complicated, I suppose. If there's one thing that the older generation, such as myself, now despite my looks, could hand over to the next generation in taking this work forward, what would you say it is? Because I'm more conscious of the things that we shouldn't be handing over rather than the things that we should be handing over. So our sense of cynicism, or our sense of helplessness about we putting all this effort and it's only resulted in so much. But what is the one thing that you would suggest or advise that we do make sure we hand over to the next generation?
Nice. And then the final one is, what are your thoughts on the recent coups in West Africa, and what role can the diaspora do? So we've got those three final questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. These are very different questions. So I'm trying to see how I can group them. But okay. We as individuals, I believe, all have a reason. I don't think anybody is here without a particular mission. I think we're all here with specific skills, talents, gifts that we can develop. So however you identify yourself, with male, female, young, old, whatever, we each understanding that we each And then just having reverence for humanity as a value, and not just humanity, but all forms of life as a value and as a principle, will help us in unifying and bringing about the unification of people of African descent, but beyond that, humanity, because in the end, at the most fundamental levels, we as humans are inextricably connected to one another. And this concept, the Ubuntu philosophy, Kathy, you mentioned earlier, we depend our survival, our well-being, how well we do in life very much depends on how we support one another and how we live with each other. So I think that's an extremely important idea to develop. In terms of what is it that we need to do, Olu, you and I may be about the same generation. I think we belong in the same generation. I think it's very important to share our experiences, our knowledge, what we have learned, what we've gained through our lives, through our, this journey, this thing called life. I mean, we learn every day is a learning opportunity. Every day, every challenge we overcome, every victory is we all have a story. We all have something of value that we need to share. So I think without discounting our individual journey, it's important to mentor and coach younger people, invest in the next generation, because, as you get older, it feels like, I was talking to a friend earlier, it feels like every decade goes faster than the one before it. So our time here is very, very limited. We're not going to be able to do everything we want to do. We won't be able to accomplish all the things we may want to accomplish in one lifetime. So it's very important to, and that's really how our ancestors have lived. They were very much, aware of the fact, the cyclical nature of life. You do each generation doing the best that it can, and then transferring knowledge. They did it orally for the most part. And that's why, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of written record, but our ancestors told stories all the time. And that's how they transmitted and transferred their knowledge, their values to successive generations. And each generation has been able to build on what has been done. And we are here today, for better or worse. In many ways, we have lost a lot of knowledge. We've lost a lot of our values. But it's very important that we go back to recover and build on it and understand how do we apply it to current day realities and preserve it. Some of it needs to be preserved and transferred to future generation, because that's what makes us who we are. So I think that part is very, very important. So I think, mentoring and coaching is very important. We do that here in our center, but we're also now developing programs online where we will be providing coaching, mentoring for small groups, for people who may be in the diaspora, who find what we do useful. We can share that information. Maybe Kathy, we'll send it to you, and then you can email it or post it somewhere where people can access it. So I think we need to do that. We need to think about, really, take our time and really think about future generations. Of course, we should also be thinking about ourselves, because if we don't invest in ourselves, if we don't acquire the knowledge and the experiences, we won't have much to transfer. We won't have a whole lot of, we may have some interesting stories to tell, but we want to make sure that we can not only understand our own journey, but also learn about those who have come before us, and put it in a way, package it. That's part of shaping our narrative, part of our shaping our individual narrative as well as our collective narrative. So each of us, we need to engage in that exercise. So I think that's it.
Amazing. I know there was another question around coups, but definitely pick this up offline, just so we don't maybe hold people back. But I think in closing, Dr. Rahel, the theme was lessons on Pan-Africanism. How do we engage in this process of COFA, go back and get it for Africa's future development? What's your closing remark? If you had like one line that was to answer that very loaded question, what's your closing statement on that?
Engage, stay engaged, care, express your love for Africa, find different ways. There's no one way. We all do it in our own ways, but we need to stay engaged. We need to think. We need to take time to be alone and understand what is important to us, and then find communities, like-minded people with whom we can share experiences and ideas, and then act. We need to organize. We need to take action. But engage, and express your love for Africa in any way that you can. Because
amazing.
It's a beautiful continent we have. We have amazing people, and not just here on the continent, but all around the world. The diaspora is everywhere, and we need to recognize what we have. We're always reminded of what we don't have, but we do have so much to build on, and that's what Africa needs at this point.
Amazing. I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Rahel, for the insightful talk. Your work is absolutely amazing. You're creating a formidable legacy. You have inspired us, in this talk that you've given. And that point around engage, care, think, take time to reflect, find community, organize, but most importantly, act, is, I think, a responsibility that we should all take in all aspects of the world and in the work that we're all doing. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time. And in closing, please, if you enjoyed today's legacy talk, connect with the Africa Center. Dr. Rahel talks about community. Dr. Rahel talks about engaging. If you don't already follow us on Twitter, Instagram, follow the Africa Center, follow the Young Africa Center. There's a whole host of events that we're putting on to really inspire the diaspora, and also follow the Africa Unbound. Follow them on Instagram, follow them on Twitter, email, go and visit the the Africa Unbound Center. Basically, let's as a community share, grow, invest, because no one's going to do it for us. And so we will follow up with all the links to the groups and the organizations, but absolutely, let's keep connecting and let's keep talking. And just thank you so much again, Dr. Rahel, and thank you everyone else who was able to contribute and join this evening. Thank you.
Patty, thank you so much. What you're doing is amazing. I love the energy, and that's exactly what Africa needs. You and the team there. Thank you so much for organizing this event and for inviting me to talk to this group. I appreciate all of you, and come and see us in Addis. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahel. And if anyone is interested in understanding more about the Young Africa Center, we have an event happening next week, Friday, called Muziki. Please get your tickets, because Muziki is a fun music show where we've got up-and-coming African Caribbean artists who will be performing. But equally follow the Young Africa Center, the Africa Center, Africa Unbound, and be the change that you want to see in the world. So yeah, that brings today's event to a close. And I don't know, Olu, I know you're the CEO of the Africa Center. Did you want to say anything in closing as well?
Just a big thank you to you, Kathy, and the rest of the team, and to Dr. Rahel. Thank you so much. And to everyone who has attended here today as well. Got old friend from Zambia there, Mwafe, nice to see you again. And to everyone else, new friends, old friends. Eric, hi, how you doing? Really good to see everybody. Look forward to your support through the rest of this series. And indeed, going into next year, because talking about legacy, next year is the Africa Center's 60th anniversary. So we'll be looking forward to engaging with you all through that year and beyond as well. Well, thank you very much.
Amazing. Amazing, everyone. Thank you and speak to you soon.
Thanks again. Goodbye.
Bye.